Stevens. I'm a retired officer, retired in 1949 as a flight officer, which is no longer, it was cut out in 49, and so I was just out of the hospital. I had 4 years in a hospital, and they retired me. I'm still a retired officer.
Sure.
I'm a happy individual, and what in 1939, I was 19 years old, and I was hungry. I didn't have any home life to speak of, and I joined the service in 39. My father was an old World War I first sergeant who had taught me how to use the system. You ever heard of the system?
Yes, sir.
Well, the system is knowing all the angles to get ahead in all kinds of ways. So I joined the service in 39, and I knew, because at 11 years old and not having a home life to speak of, I decided, being brought up in the Catholic section of Boston, and I'm a Protestant, I had a hell of a time going to not get beat up going to school and stuff, but these were tough kids.
Sure.
And I never developed any pals that were kids. I developed adults. I did little work for a druggist. I made friends with a man who sold paint, both Jewish, and they seemed to like me and took me more or less into their arms to teach me things and learn things, how to handle adults. And in handling adults, the thing was to learn what their business was, how they did it, and so they sort of enveloped me. I used to go to breakfast every morning with the Jewish man who sold paint at a Jewish restaurant, strawberry tea and other things to eat. And the other was a pharmacist who took me in, and I used to take the papers in to the pharmacy, and he hired me for about 25 cents a week, and made me a soda jerk. And I learned that Coca-Cola didn't just come in a bottle. It came into the drugstore, and the soda jerk had to mix the thing to make Coca-Cola, and then add the fuzz to it, the zip to it, and from other deals and whatnot. I learned all sorts of things. And it was 1938 was Prohibition, and the druggists sold bootleg little bottles of grain alcohol to people, and I used to sell it when he wasn't around, and I sold a lot of bootleg booze as a 17, almost 17. I joined the service, and I got KP. Now, I knew all about KP because my father had taught me all about it, and he'd already taken me out to the firing range when I was about 12 and qualified me in M1 rifles, just for the hell of it. And the rifle, you lay down in prone position, and it's on a slope, a little slope toward the target, And every time I don't know what I weighed then, but every time I shot the M1 rifle, which had a pistol grip, the only one I've ever seen, and I'd fire that thing, and my body would skid back down about a foot. And he qualified me, and he wrote it down. And I wish I kept all those papers and stuff. He helped me. And when I joined, there wasn't much food around. It was a depression actually, and so we ate very, very well. And so they assigned me KP. Now I've been around the military for years with my father, more or less, and I saw how things operated. So they called out my name and said, "You're in KP." And I put up my hand and I said, "I know what I'd like to do on KP." And they said, "You know what you want on KP?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "What do you want to do?" And I knew who worked the hardest, who did the best things, and who got ahead the most. And I said, "I want to be on what everybody hated, pots and pans." Well, that's a dirty old job, isn't it? And so, but the guys that were eating family style at tables, and they had guys on KP who served and cleaned up all that stuff. They worked from about 5 in the morning till about 8 or 9 at night. So I went on pots and pans, and when you get through cooking, that's when I really worked, and I made everything polished. I polished the damn barrels. I polished all the, make sure that cereal, all the things that they work with to make any food really shine. And at the end of the day, the Captain Lieblich came down, and he looked and he says, "I've never seen pots and pans as shiny or barrels. Who the hell did this?" And he says, "Stevens." And he looked around and saw me, and he had known my father. And he says, "Stevens," he says, "this is the best I've ever seen, so shiny." I did it deliberately because to draw his attention. And then he turned to the first sergeant at that time and said, "What else can this guy do?" And he says, "He can type 50 words a minute." And they needed a battery clerk. Now, a battery clerk is a good job. And I took care of all the duty rosters. I took care of anything that came across from headquarters or anything else.
And so this is a basic training?
No,
oh, okay.
This is just being. We had no basic training in those days. They
Okay.
put you in a boot squad for a week. That was the basic training. So
where was this at, sir?
Where
were you at this point?
At Boston Harbor.
Okay.
I was at a small base. It was the Coast Artillery. So he says, "I want you to be my battery clerk." He says, "Because you can type, and the guy I got doesn't know what he's doing." So I became the battery clerk. I became friends of every man in the outfit for one reason. I handled the duty rosters. And in handling the duty rosters, I made friends with every damn one of them by seeing that when they had a date that they didn't have duty. Somebody else had the duty. I worked it so it's called working the system.
Sure.
That's the first step of working the system. And it turned out so well. And so I got promotions, corporal quickly, and up the line to a sergeant, and I was made the battalion guy who did all the battalion stuff, and so I was transferred to the battalion, and I had more responsibility and whatnot. And then one day I was working at headquarters, and I was doing stuff, and a letter came through with a red border. I'd never seen a letter with a red border. And the red border, I read it twice, and I said to myself, well, here's something that looks interesting. It was from Hap Arnold, Commanding General of the Air Corps at that time. All the flying stuff he was in charge of. And it said they wanted 10,000 glider pilots. And I said, what the hell is a glider pilot? Which I've heard ever since by so many women. and so I went into my CO Lieblich, I think it was his name, and said, I want to get into the glider program. And he looked up at me and quizzically, he was the battalion commander, this guy, and he says, what the hell do you want to be flying a goddamn glider? He says, you're going to be dead in 6 weeks. And I said to myself, I'd rather be dead than in this goddamn outfit. Because they were doing nothing. They were getting rid of the Coast Artillery. And they were going to they finally wound up being an anti-aircraft outfit, which I was never around. So he says, okay. He says, you can apply for it, and I'll okay it. And he was a major, and so they sent me to some coastal outfit. What the hell? I've forgotten even the name of the base. There was a base on the East Coast that they sent me because it was an Air Corps base. And I walked into this place, and there was a second lieutenant that was a flight surgeon. He was a second lieutenant, and he was a nice guy. And sitting in his office was 12 or 11 or 12 good-looking, handsome, big guys, and they looked perfect for whatever the Air Corps would want. And so he took each one in, and they came out, and not a damn one of them passed. They were football players, and they'd all been injured, so they couldn't get into the Air Corps. They were not physically good enough.
Wow.
They had broken this and broken that and all that stuff. And so the second lieutenant came out and smiled at me and says, well, he says, you're next. He says, you're a scrawny little bastard. You'll see how good you are. And I had kept up pretty good physically. And he gave me all the tests and all the deals with the sticks, you know, to make everything know all that stuff. And depth perception and all that you had to know to be a pilot, especially. So, he came out and he says, you know, he says, you're just what we want. He says, you can do everything perfectly. You got the build, you're slender, everything, but you got a problem. I says, what the hell, I passed all the tests? He says, yep, but you still got a problem. He says, God damn, you don't weigh enough. I weighed 130 pounds. I was supposed to weigh 135 to go to flight school. I couldn't go, and he walked around the office a little bit, and he says, you know, he says, you're really should be in this training program. He says, you know where we're standing? I says, yeah, right in the little office here for the exams. He says, we're 1 block away from the mess hall. I said, why that? He says, now, he says, I want you to step out of here. I want you to walk down 1 block to the mess hall. I want you to see Sergeant so-and-so. He says, I want you to ask him for 5 bananas, 5 bananas, or a bundle of bananas. It was a goodly bunch. He says, I want you to eat all those damn bananas and then come back here. And I said to myself, this is the system, something I can do. So I stepped out of the office. I stepped out onto the ground, and this base was right on, practically on the water. And I looked down, and this is beach type, and it's all those little round stones. You know how they are at the beach. And I said to myself, And I waited for the lieutenant to disappear, and I slowly stepped down. And as I went to the mess hall, I stuffed my shoes. I stuffed every damn spot that I could hide it. And all those damn stones, all the way to the mess hall. I got to the mess hall and talked to the first sergeant, no, the mess sergeant. And I says, he says, well, what do you want, Sarge? And I said, I want 2 bananas. He looked at me kind of quizzically and says, every other damn man's come in here and asked for a whole bundle of bananas. You only want 2? I said, all I need is 2 bananas. And he gave me my bananas. I took almost an hour walking back because I'm supposed to be eating all kinds of bananas. I ate 1 banana. It took me almost an hour to get back there, just diddling around, walking around and seeing how wonderfully the Air Corps was being treated and fed and handled, and they were treated as real men instead of GIs. So I get back to the office and I knocked on the door, and the lieutenant came out and said, well, how the hell did you do? I says, I'll never eat another goddamn banana as long as I live. I said, I'm full of bananas. And he looked at me, he says, okay, he says, let's see what the hell you did. He takes me and weighs me, I weigh 136. He signs the papers, it puts me in training to be a glider.
And what year is this, sir?
1952, I think it was.
42, sir?
Wait a minute, let me get my years right. I'm 96 now.
You're doing better than me, sir.
And so, yeah, it was before it really became the Air Corps. My girlfriend.
Okay.
I'm only 96. What the hell is it? Here it is.
Pause it.
Hi, Bonnie. Will be a student glider pilot, right?
Sir.
And you found a plug-in?
It should be fine for now, sir. Let's make sure
Okay.
it's not on the record. There we go. Okay.
So I just was going to be accepted to be in the program.
Yes, sir.
So by now, having been in battalion, I was a staff sergeant, which was a big, big deal back in those days in '44. That was before it even got really started. And because there wasn't many promotions, it was still peacetime. So as a staff sergeant, they sent me to Randolph Field, Texas. And being a staff sergeant, which was a big deal, they made me commander of the group that was going to school to Minnesota. And so I assumed that this group, 144 of them, and they were all civilians, and I'd say left face, and you never saw such a mess. They didn't know what the hell left face was. And so I put them on a train, and we went to Minnesota and drank our way all the way up to Minnesota, because they all still had money on them and stuff. And we had a wonderful time, and it got to Minnesota, and they went to the school. We were staying at the school, the regular school. They turned into a quarters for us, and I was again made commander of the school, because I did already 4 years in time, and had some promotions and all that stuff. And so I ran the school, which was another part of the system. I ran stuff. I didn't have to do a damn thing if I didn't want to do it. And it was a real gravy train. My biggest duty was in the morning at 6:30. There would be the second lieutenant would come out, and I'd call all the people out, all the men, and have them at attention and report to the second lieutenant, all present and accounted for, because they were all there. And so dismissed, and then I'd march them down to Chow at the Legion Hall. And I sat at a table that was elevated and stuff, because I was in charge of everything. And it was a good deal. I'd march them back and go out to the flight line, and then just start to learn how to fly. And I was doing the same thing, but I had a real good instructor, and I do what he wanted me to do, and that was all I ever did. And I was running things, the whole damn thing, because the second lieutenants would come out and ask if all present accounted for. They'd just woke up, and they'd go back to bed, I think. So I did this for a couple of weeks, and I decided I gotta go down and see what's in Minneapolis. I said, that's a big town, from what they say. So it was toward the weekend, and I took the bus down to Hennepin Avenue, the main drag, and I walked by a Walgreens. And it was like you see today, Walgreens. And they're standing in the window as you walk by, and I saw a few GIs, and they were talking to a really gorgeous woman. And I said, she's got to be Swedish. And they drifted away, and I walked in, and I started talking to her. And I talked her into a date that evening at Slicer's Bar right across the street. And so we went over, and we had a couple of drinks, we danced, we held, we really looked at each other's eyes, and we really liked each other. So, I mean, yeah, and once we really knew each other, She says, I have to go to my aunt's house. She says, I'm a one-room school teacher, and it's summertime, so I'm staying with my aunt on Lake Street. So I walked down there, and I walked through a bunch of parks. And Minneapolis has a lot of parks. And we get near her aunt's house, and she said, I don't know what to say, but I've been walking through these parks, and my legs are dirty, and so are my shoes and stuff. I don't want to walk in as though I've been out doing things. And so I sat her down in the park. I stripped the stockings off her legs. In those days, World War II, the only thing they had was cotton socks that came up to about here. That's what all the women wore, because nylon was being used for the military. And I stripped one stocking off her leg, and I touched her leg, and it was like electricity. My God, I got a shock. I said, wow. And so I cleaned her leg, cleaned her shoes, and I said, could I see you next week? I'm off duty on the weekends. And she said, oh, yeah, okay. The next weekend, I go to town. Oh, no, that same evening, it was getting to it around 11 o'clock at night. I got the last bus out to Monticello, and I woke up 144 men. I made them stand at attention in a line, and I says, men, I've met the woman I'm gonna marry. And they all laughed like hell, having a good time, because the only thing they thought was, if he gets married, we get to kiss her. So, the next weekend comes, we go out, we really have a good time. We really know that I told her I loved her and I wanted to marry her. The second time. And so, she says, yes, I'll marry you. For some reason, she said yes. And I said, well, how are we going to get married? She says, well, there's a Lutheran church right down the street. So we walked down to there, in the pastor, still the evening, pastor's around and stuff, and we tell him we want to get married. He says, why don't you come in and talk to me? So we walked in, and we talked for almost an hour to this young pastor, Lutheran minister. And he looks at the end of it, he says, I can't marry you. We said, why not? We're in love. He says, you don't know each other long enough to even know each other. And so that killed that. And so we go out, and we go to the drugstore there in Monticello, and some of my students and stuff are talking to the soda jerk and whatnot, and a woman comes walking along, Mrs. McIntyre. So, and she's listening, and she says, you two seem really in love, and you want to get married? And we said, yes. She says, I'm the leader of the Methodist church down the street. Why don't we go talk to my minister? And so she takes us down there. We talked to him for about an hour or so. He says, well, he says, you know, 2 weeks, and next week I've got some other business that I got to do, but the 4th week I'll marry you. And so Mrs. McIntyre pops up and says, now my husband's military and he's overseas, so you come and stay with me to her. So I take her to Mrs. McIntyre's house, get her settled in for the night. And I go back to the base, and the guys are kidding me and whatnot, so it all works out. The next weekend,
How old were you around this point, sir?
I was, let's see, was I 20? I must have been about 20.
Okay.
And it's so damn long ago, I forget the time. And I got shot partly in the face, and I drool here, and I drip.
Oh, you're fine, sir.
I got it drools here because I don't hear too good on this side, and I got bullet fragments in my head. But I did have. And so she's at Mrs. McIntyre, and my wife is a young, beautiful, tall Swede, my future bride. And Mrs. McIntyre and her really clicked. Mrs. McIntyre quizzes her quite a bit about life and whatnot, and realizes my wife is a virgin and doesn't know a damn thing about sex or any of that stuff, because she was a school teacher teaching 32 students at one time. And so that next week, she takes my wife down to the drugstore, to the druggist, an old guy. Women weren't doing drugstore stuff then. And they teach her all about how not to get pregnant just because you got married. And and Lori, my wife, my future wife, she tells Lori tells me all about that, and which makes us happy because we don't want any children.
Mm-hmm.
And so comes the fourth week, I marched all the guys down in dress uniform to the Methodist church. And so the service starts to go on, and my wife has 12 brothers and sisters. She's from northern Minnesota, up in the woods, and I guess the old boy had nothing else to do, and he was a drinker. But God, what a beautiful bunch of people they were, those Swedes. And so we start to go up the aisle, and she had 6 brothers and 6 sisters, and they were on each side. And so the brothers and sisters, they don't know me from Adam. And so every step they took, they said one thing: don't marry him. Don't marry him. Don't marry him. Finally, we get up there and we do get married. And so now we're man and wife, and our honeymoon night is with Mrs. McIntyre in a separate part of the house. And next morning she come out and she says, "You two must have had a lot of fun last night." That's the only thing she ever said. And so I go back to the base, and the base CO says, "I don't know what you've been, but you got a job. You got 32 troops that you have to take to Randolph Field, Texas, to go to another school because we got too many." And so I know I've been around there for a while and knew how to work the system. I went down to railroad station and made friends with the station master and got my wife a ticket to get on the same damn train. So we're gonna have I'm just taking one car down, the 32, and we get a room in the thing. We get on the train that evening, and we chug off and head toward Texas. We get down to some town along the coast. I think I don't remember what the name of the place was. It was kind of a railroad yard, and there was banging on the. We had the room. There was banging on the door, real bang. I got to look decent. Opened the door, and there was a second lieutenant, big, tall guy with two MPs. And he looked down at me, he says, "You're under arrest." I says, "What the hell have I done that I'm under arrest?" He says, "This train is now a GI train, and no women allowed on it." And so they call the Salvation Army, and she had the tickets, which was the thing, and they arranged it for her to go to Randolph Field, where I met her later, and that's how we really got married. And for 69 years we were married. 69 wonderful years with wonderful. Those relatives really loved me. After I was wounded, and I lived with them, and they taught me everything I ever knew about shooting deer. Man, we ate enough venison and eggs and stuff. I was in heaven with it. And that's enough about me getting married. But I got married. It was 4 weekends. And not many people that have done that, I think.
Make it last. You certainly did.
It lasted until the year 12, when she passed away.
Sorry.
And now it tore me apart, her death. And I had already been wounded and all that stuff. And I wasn't in very good shape. But I had to do something. And I woke up one morning and I was in this house. I bought this house for $14,100 in '56. And we lived in it ever since today. And my wife was gone. I felt like shit, no matter how you slice it. I said, I gotta do something. And I looked in the mirror and I said to myself, I got one of two things I can do. I can stay in this house, not do a goddamn thing, and die. Or I can get off my ass and go out and live. And I said, Lori would never want me to do that first part. So I've done it. I now have 4 girlfriends. And I live a good life. And all my girlfriends are much younger. My number 1 girlfriend, Bonnie, that was just on the phone with me. She's 67. And we have a good time talking, and she helps me. She's had a lot of medical training. She's a lot in schooling, and she saved my life one time right here. Strange way. So they dug up the street here. You ever travel up?
I know. I drove down there and the street was dug up.
Well, it used to be right in front of us, right here, down to the corner. And they were down 17 feet, putting in a line here that was all rotted away, right at the corner. So they closed up one day. They had just dug down and they had cleaned it up and were ready to put more pipe in. So I went to bed one evening, and at 7 o'clock at night, I woke up with a gasp. I couldn't breathe. I just could not breathe. but my phone was right by me, and I managed to call Bonnie, which is my girlfriend, #1 girlfriend at that time, and she answered, and I says, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. I said, help. And she lives about 2-3 blocks away from here. She dashed over here. She weighs about 130 pounds. Dashed in this door, took a sniff, and realized it was they had left the sewer system to the main sewer open right to my house, only my house. And so it was going to kill me, those fumes. And she picked me up out of that bed, I don't know how she did it, and got me out there to that chair. It gave me CP, or whatever they call it.
CPR?
Yeah, and revived me so that I would live. If I had not done that, within a few more minutes, I would have died. So that's how.
We're ready to go.
And we've been really pals ever since. And so back to combat.
So after training, where were you assigned to?
I was assigned to different units. I wasn't. It's such a long story. Things that I did. I was in charge of 144 guys in one operation, and 40% died. Describe it, I can't. I've written it, and I've written it from the heart, every damn bit of everything I did. And the only thing I can say to you is I can give you a copy of everything I've written about what happened to me, because everything is a big story. What happened to me, different. So I did a lot of stuff that was kind of secret and all kinds of stuff, and I can give you a copy. I've got an extra copy of everything that happened to me, actually from the beginning to the present almost, and all about Bonnie, my buddy, and my other gal friends, and things that happened to me, and how I had an audience with a pope, and things that I've done. I did stuff that nobody else has done. Staying out of trouble and doing things to help people and save people. All kinds of little stuff that I've done, which I think would be a hell of a lot better than me going on, because my memory is not that sharp anymore.
It's still very sharp, sir.
But why don't I go get something that I just, a friend made some copies of for me, and just kind of go through it a little bit, and I think you'd do a lot better than that. Really.
Well, sir, can I still ask you some more questions, like on the camera and everything?
Sure. Anything you want to know.
Sir, so what unit were you attached with?
I gotta see what time it is.
It is.
Yeah, I see it. 10 minutes to 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said, what unit were you originally assigned to, after training with squadron?
Oh, Well, I was in charge of a bunch of glider pilots, and they didn't know what the hell to do with us glider pilots because we were not supposed to live. We were supposed to do things behind the lines and stuff, but die, of all things. And we were all individuals in doing, because these glider pilots that were facing supposedly death any times that we go out and do things, they never bothered us. One of the main things, let's see if I get that.
Sir, will you say your name and rank one more time real quick?
Okay, Leonard J. Stevens, Flight Officer, United States Air Force, retired.
And do you remember your serial number by any chance, sir?
201-20827.
So you, in here it says you found out you were going to be a father, then were sent to Africa?
What happened was they sent us to a port of embarkation on the East Coast.
And this is after Texas, sir?
It's all written down in this, what I'm going to give you, and I'm not giving it to anyone else.
Thank you, sir.
Because the gal who copied it for me was a state, something to do with the law, and she made some copies for me, which was very nice of her. And so they said they assigned us to a ship to go somewhere overseas. We didn't know where the hell we were sent, because everything's secret. So we go down, and using my system of knowing what to do about things, as soon as we got there, I went and saw the CO of the ship and told him how I was in charge of all this, that, and another, and they assigned me a room, more or less, to myself. And so we all load onto this ship, and the woman comes running up to the ship, and she says, "Do you have a Stevens on board?" And they come and got me, and I went up there. She says, I can only just say what happened. She says, "You're a father." And so I had a son born as I was getting on the damn ship. And so we took off on this ship. We were out in the Atlantic, and I look up, and we're going kind of south. I said, "We're not going to England, where we go in the invasion." And no, they said, "We're going to Casablanca." I says, "What the hell is a glider pilot going to do in Casablanca?" And so we're coming across the sea. I'm living well, because I could eat with the mess, and the food was good and everything, and the GIs were having a more or less good time, because the sailors were doing all the duty stuff. And we're getting close to Africa, and we're looking out, and here's this beautiful white city off in the distance, Casablanca, a city of mystery. And we get closer, and we start to smell it. What a stink. It was awful. Because they had no sewage system or nothing there. And so we get off the ship, and then they take us and put us in tents, 144 officers and gentlemen. But we realized that it was native country, native land, and we had to be careful. So they assigned us St. Louis military GIs to look after us. They prided themselves in killing at least one Arab each a night, trying to steal our luggage. And we're there for a while, and then they said, there's an assignment for you to go to Lergmer, which is up the coast. We get on a train that goes 16 miles an hour. It stops a lot. It stops at every bavette on the way. The guy stayed drunk the whole damn way. And at night, the train would stop. Natives would come down, and the Sinhalese would pop them off. They'd fall off the damn train. Usually they got to the train, to the cars or someplace, and they'd be killed, and they'd fall off, and the natives in the fields would come running down, strip them clean, and leave them for the birds. So that shows you how cheap life was.
And who was coming towards the train?
Huh?
Who was running towards the train, you said?
The natives that their job is stealing from trains. Everybody's poor in hell, and they'll steal anything. And so we get to Lergmer, French military base along the coast, and it's a French base, and they have a nice French officers club, and we were having a good time. We lived in tents, and the Sinhalese were guarding the tents and still killing at least one Arab a night. They could speak perfect English for some reason. The Sinhalese, very intelligent, very nice, and we treated them as equals, and they really, really liked us. And so we were there about 2 weeks, and we were at the club at 10 o'clock at night at the French Officers Club. They had Italian prisoners that would bring out these military cookers and cook pork chops and stuff for all of us. We had a rough life.
Sounds like it.
And so we're pretty drunk, most of the guys. I don't drink. I never have. And so the guy, I think his name was Walsh, coming back to the tents, being escorted by Sinhalese. They always escort you, because the Arabs would kill you just to take what you got on you. And which also in Corsica too. I had all kinds of experiences. And so we're up by the flight line, and there's a P-40, a nice World War II fighter, one of the early ones, and it's sitting there idling. And Walsh says, "What the hell is that thing sitting there idling?" Getting warmed up, I guess. He walks over to it and climbs in. He says, "I can fly this goddamn thing," and takes off and flies all around for about 40 minutes, crashes and kills himself. So
And he had been drinking?
Oh yeah. So then the next morning, this French general in charge of the base lined us all up and said, "I want you, all you goddamn glider pilots off this base within 12 hours. And he says, "I'm going to arrange it." So he found some sort of a black detachment with trucks, and they loaded us on us and took us to the beachhead and put us on a freighter going somewhere. We got on there and went across the Pacific, the Mediterranean to Italy. And so we're there, and we stay on the ship. We're in the harbor, and every night the Germans would come over and bomb us for some reason. Never hit us, but the ship was always going like this and stuff. And finally we get off the ship, and got a train to go to Rome. Rome had just been taken, finished being taken. You can't let loose a bunch of bastards like the glider pilots. So they look at us all and they said, we don't know what the hell we're doing here. We don't even want you here. So they put us in a tent city about 40 miles outside of Rome, and they bring in all kinds of supplies and stuff and to live and to eat and all that jazz. So all the gliders look at each other and look down the road and see all the nice buildings toward the main part of the city. So what do? They go into the mess area, they steal all the goddamn food, they split it all up, and we got the bus that goes to Rome, to the main city, and which stops for the Italians and whatnot, and we people that could speak Italian, we were talking to all these people, and so they all got the deal that on the way in, all the people are really starving, and they're all the wives of Italian soldiers that are overseas. So they stop at every stop. The bus driver was in on it, and go in to see these women and have her food, and they move in and live. I mean, just a glider pilot. They don't know what the hell to do with a glider pilot. And so they're screwing away all the way to center of Rome, and it's a great life. And so one day, I'm just with them quite a bit and trying to keep them out of trouble. I stayed in a apartment next to a cat house into a pro station of all places, and that wasn't about the cat house because I just get married and all that stuff. And so and my buddies used to come and stay at my place until the woman that owned the place would get pissed off at all the noise and all the cat house stuff going on in the apartment and stuff, and she'd kick me out, and I'd go sleep in the bus, not a bus, but an ambulance that the pro station had parked in front. So I had a place to sleep every night that the guys were having a good time too, and I was having a good nap. And that went on for a while. Then what happened? I think what you should do now, because it is getting a little late for me at this time, I've got a copy of what happened to me overseas.
Yes, sir.
And if you take that, read it, and there are any more questions some other time, I'll be glad to answer.
Okay.
How's that sound?
Sounds good, sir.
I had the one adventure that I had that nobody else has ever had. And I had an audience with the Pope at a time where he never, ever gave an audience to a military man.
Will you tell me about that? Real quick, like briefly?
I'll let you read it.
Okay.
My name is Leonard J. Stevens, born up in Boston, Massachusetts, and I was a staff sergeant way back in '52, I think it was.
42?
42, yeah,
Yes, sir.
42. I get my
Oh, it's fine.
my ears a little scratched, and I was in the Coast Artillery in Boston Harbor, and and I was a commanding officer of a group of men, and I was a flight officer. A flight officer is a rank that's no longer. In 1952, they eliminated it, and I am a retired flight officer, wounded and all that stuff, but in Boston Harbor, I was the commanding officer of 144 men, and all of a sudden it came a deal to hire, get some glider pilots. Hap Arnold, the commanding general of the Air Corps at that time, had seen that the Germans had been so successful coming out of Africa to Crete and tremendous fortifications. And what the Germans did is they came in 2-man gliders, just 2 people in a glider, and they landed in the dark of night, and they came to all these fortifications, and what they did, they had bombs and all kinds of stuff to kill people by dropping stuff down the ventilation shacks of all the great fortifications, and they killed practically everybody on the Isle of Crete, and it scared the hell out of the Americans. They said, if they can do that, we have to think about something about gliders. And so they came, and I had already 4 years service, and I was a staff sergeant, and there were very few NCOs in the service at that time, because the war hasn't really burst forth. So I volunteered to be a glider pilot, and they saw who I was and what I did, and practically nothing in the Coast Artillery of Boston, and they said, you've got 4 years service, you know what you're doing, and there's not many glider, there's not any staff sergeants or higher in the service yet. So they said, we're going to make you the commanding officer of the glider corps. And I said, the glider corps? I said, I don't even know what it is. And they said, well, what you're going to do, you're going to be in charge of all the deals in schools to teach these people to be glider pilots. And I said, I don't even know what a glider pilot is. And so they said, we'll take you to Washington. And they took me to Washington and saw a bunch of old guys. And they said, yeah, we need glider pilots. And they said, you have experience as an NCO, and we're going to let you be in charge of the schools. So I said, okay, great. So they took me to a base, and they had two-place gliders there, and they took me up and flew around in them, and then they had developed a glider for combat. The glider was 83-foot wingspan. It was huge. And so they trained me in that a little bit. I didn't know the damn things didn't have a motor. So here I am, and so I went to Minnesota to a school and said, "You're in charge." And so I had 144 men at this little school, and so here I was teaching these people, not me teaching. We found a bunch of people, old glider pilots that flew private plane gliders and stuff, and I learned all kinds of things, and it was exciting. And went. They took us. Oh yeah. I have to stop and think of some of the things that happened at those times. So here I am in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's cold as hell.
That's where you met your wife, right?
So I'm in charge of the school. I'm having a good time. Because I like to be in charge of things anyway. So I went down on the weekend down to Minneapolis to Hennepin Avenue, and I walked by a Walgreens drugstore, and I looked in the window and I saw this gorgeous Swedish gal. She must have been Swedish because she was blonde and tall, and there was some GIs in there, and they would flirt with her and stuff, and they drifted away, and I went in and I talked to her for about 30 minutes and got a date with her. And so she was very receptive to go out with me. We went across the street to Slizer's Bar, and we danced, drank a little, had a hell of a good time. And so here it is, getting toward evening, and she's staying at her aunt's house down Lake Street because she's a one-room school teacher, the old school teacher type. And I made a date with her for the next weekend, and it's about 10 at night, and I get on a bus and I go out to Monticello where the school is, and I walk into the school, and I got 144 GIs that don't know a damn thing because they're right out of civilian life. I had to teach them their left foot from their right. And so I called them all outside, onto the street, lined them up, showed them how to stand at attention and whatnot. And I told them I met the woman I'm going to marry. And they all laughed like hell. And they said, "Well, we get to kiss the bride anyway." So I go, the next week I take Lori out dancing and having a good time. And I asked to marry her. And for some unknown reason, she said yes, she would. And I said, well, we got to find a preacher. So we found a Lutheran pastor, and he talked to us for over an hour. And he looked at us toward the end, and he says, "You know, you don't even know each other." And we said, "Yes, but we really wish to get married because I think we're made for each other." And he looked at me. He says, "I'm not going to marry you." He says, "I can't marry you. You don't even really know each other." So she goes back down to our aunt's house. I go back out the base, and the guys are kidding the hell out of me because I'm saying I'm gonna marry a woman I don't even know her. And so this next weekend, we go out, we have a good time. We go to a drugstore, and the guys are all kidding me about wanting to get married and whatnot, and no way could we do that. And we're in this drugstore at the soda fountain, and this woman walks by, a Mrs. McIntyre. I didn't know from Adam. And she heard us talking that we wanted to get married because we were in love. So she turns around and looks at us and starts asking us questions about why we want to get married. And she wanted actually to get out of Minnesota. She wanted to travel. And so we were going to get married. Mrs. McIntyre turned to Lori, my future wife, and said, my husband's in the military. He's an officer, but he's not here. She said, what I can do, I can take you to meet my pastor, a Methodist preacher. And so she took us down to her church, which was the next block down. And we talked to him for about 2 hours. He says, I will marry you because you seem to be a good couple for marriage. And so we were happy. Lori was going to go back down to her aunt's, but Mrs. McIntyre says, come stay with me. I'm alone. I'd be happy to have you. And so the next week, she stayed with Mrs. McIntyre at her home, and they had a great time together. In the meantime, my future wife, Lori, kept asking her questions. Because this old gal was about 50 or so, and she'd been around a good bit. And so she says to Lori, she says, you know what? She says, you really don't know anything about sex, do you? And she says, not really. He says, you're in for a great experience. She says, what I would like to do is take you down to the drugstore. So she took Lori down to the drugstore to the pharmacist. It was a woman pharmacist. And they discussed for a while, I don't know how long, about the facts of life, about sex, and how not to get knocked up the first time you sleep with a man and all that stuff. And so that went off well, and the next Saturday's coming up. I got 144 men who are, and I'm in charge of it and the whole deal, and they're there to come to my wedding. And so as soon I get those guys lined up that Saturday, they come, I march them down to the church, and we get ready to get married. And while we're puttering around and stuff and getting things set up, other people about the same age, almost to my thinking, and I couldn't figure out who the hell all these people were coming, these civilians were coming in to be in the wedding. And I start talking to them, and I find out my future wife has 12 brothers and sisters. and they're all at the wedding. And they're walking around and talking to the GIs and having a good time, but they seem quite concerned. So the wedding starts on, and we line up with Lori's family. I have nobody there except the GIs, and so we get in lines, two lines of six girls and 6 boys. So we're in line, and they start the service, and the line of girls, the line of boys, and the GIs are filling up the place. So we look at each other, and we start to go up the aisle to get married. And every step that I took, and her brothers and sisters would take a step, and as they stepped, they said, and the preacher was saying things about getting married, and we'd take a step, and all her brothers and sisters would say, "Don't marry him. Don't marry him. He's got a girl in every port." So we get through all that, and the GIs are happy. They get to kiss the bride. And had a dinner and all that stuff. And so Mrs. McIntyre and Lori, my wife, and we all go to Mrs. McIntyre's house, and that's our honeymoon house. So I get orders coming from above that I'm in charge of a train. I said, "In charge of a train for what?" They said, "We're going to take these 144 men, take them down to where was it? Texas, and they're distributed to bases around the country to learn how to fly gliders." So the next day, it's just a regular train with a one room that she and I had, and we start down on the train, the civilian train. We get down to the middle of the country in some little town, and she and I are, of course, together, and there's a big banging on the door. Bang, bang, bang. So I get to look decent, open the door, and there's a big second lieutenant MP with 2 GIs, and they looked at me and they said, "You're under arrest." I said, "What the hell am I under arrest for?" They said, "This has turned into a troop train, and you have a civilian woman on a troop train." And so I talked my way with these guys, and they got some type of service. I think it was a Salvation Army or something like that. And they took Lori off the train, and I finally met her again down at Wright Field in Texas. And so having already 4 years service, so I know what the hell the score was in life in the military. And they sent me to a school up in Minnesota, back up there, and I trained guys for quite a while. And we flew those gliders. They only had a few of them. 83-foot wingspan. That's this lot is 100 foot. So, so it's a hell of a big plane. And so it seemed okay. And I went to another school, and Lori went along and stayed with other people in the little places. In those days, they were just little places to live, very little, and stayed there and taught. I got to be a pretty good pilot. I taught the guys, and all of a sudden, there came an order, assemble, and they read off a bunch of all our names and whatnot, and said, "You're going overseas." I said, "Okay." And Mrs. McIntyre was still around and was taking care of Lori, and so I got my 144 men, took them to the East Coast and got on a ship, and I didn't know what the hell it. I'd never been on a ship before. It was a tramp steamer, and we took off over the seas, and I found out that we didn't even know where the hell we were going because it was so secret. We wound up in North Africa, of all places, and it was. And we got on a train and went to a French military base with a general in charge, and he worked with me, and so we, of course, Lori's back home, staying with Mrs. McIntyre, and living a good life with some of the other guys that had married women too. So there in Minneapolis, it was a pretty good deal for them. And so they're in Casablanca, landed in Casablanca of all places, like a wild west town. And it had prisons and all kinds of stuff that GIs were being held in and whatnot. And I was in charge of these 144 staying at this officers' club fair, Toulouse Army Airfield. It was a French base, and they were teaching Frenchmen how to fly B-24s, which was a twin-engine plane. But the trouble is with the B-24s, they tried to teach them like they're fighters, and they keep killing most of them as they taught them. And we had a good time. One night, I was at the club with some fellows, and we were living in tents. They had tents that they put us in. Well, the French troop had some tents and some other places. So we had a party one night, a pretty wild party. So we had Singalese troops guarding us, and we had treated the Singalese troops who spoke English with great respect, because they had been fighting a war in North Africa all along. and they liked us. So this one night we had this party at the officers club, and the Senegalese troops would pride themselves in killing at least one Arab a night, because it was just their pride, because the Arabs would steal anything that they could get their hands on.
Mm.
So this Senegalese, one of the COs was walking me back to our tents, which we didn't particularly like, because we had a lot of troubles with the natives and stuff, and we got near the flight line, and on the flight line was a P-40 fighter craft, and it was idling there, and most of my men were drunker than skunks, and so one of the guys said, I know how to fly a P-40, and he walks over, he climbs in the damn thing and takes off, and is flying all over North Africa in the thing. And finally something happens, and he crashes and kills himself. So the next morning, this general lines up us 144. We're all officers and gentlemen by now, you know, because we're pilots. And he lines us up. He says, "You son of a bitches," he says, you got 12 hours to get off this base and out of Africa." And so he calls the transportation corps with trucks, that has trucks with black drivers that are wild drivers, and they loaded us all on that and take us to Missouri, which is on the coast of the Mediterranean, and they kept us under guard even, because they didn't want us to get loose, and what happened then? Oh yeah, then they got us on a ship and took off for Europe, for Italy, and so we're on this ship, and we get into Naples, and we're sitting in Naples Harbor for 4 nights, and every night the Germans come over and bomb us and make the ship rock back and forth and whatnot, but that's all. And there was a few British sappers, they call them, people that are doing some sort of deal inland somewhere in Italy when they get there. And all they worried about was they spent the 4 days we were on the ship, they spent down in the galley, and all they were worried about for the 4 days was they didn't want to spill their tea that they were brewing in the big cauldrons and stuff, and having fun with us and stuff. And so we're in there in Naples Harbor, and they finally get us off that ship, and they take us into a place where there's food and stuff, and we're doing pretty good there. Then oh yeah, once we get settled in, the thing that they had there, they had a big kitchen, and on the kitchen, a lot of GIs were around us. They were taking care of, and they were feeding all these people, and all these people were having a hell of a good time because the place was just alive with kids. And these kids were buying, selling, doing anything they could to get food to take back to their homes.
Okay.
So, so they were doing well, and we finally got away from them and headed up to Rome. And so at Rome, we were stationed around Rome in different places. We weren't just stationed around. We were out supposedly living in tents about 18 miles outside of Rome. But we weren't just 18 miles outside of Rome. We could take a bus and go into Rome and really raise hell and have a good time. Glider pilots were noted later on in the war as one-way pilots. You're going to have a mission and get killed because actually everybody died in different deals that I was in charge of and stuff. One mission, I took a group into Yugoslavia to rescue people, and 40% of my men were killed. And so here I am in Rome, and I'm living a good life because coming into Rome, we were stationed 18 miles outside of Rome, and as we came in, we could come by lots and lots of nice homes, and on the way in, before we went in, we stole every bit of food out of the damn area that we had. Well, canned bacon, canned this, canned that, and we'd stop at houses, and all these houses had women that were Italian military people off at war, and they were at home and hungry, and so we took food and started living with all these women. So that's what a glider pilot does. The first thing he does when he gets to town is where is he going to get laid? That's, they were right out of civilian life, and they were a pretty rough bunch, and they had a hell of a good time. And so I'm in Rome, and I go down to headquarters, and at headquarters, it's not much going on, and they made me a duty officer, and the Colonel Cheney, came down and was walking around and stuff, and said, I need an officer. He says, you're the duty officer. He says, I have a mission for you. I said, yes, sir. He says, now this may sound strange, but this deal is very, very important. It says, you're in uniform, you're going to do something that nobody else will be doing. I said, yes, sir. He says, you're going to meet the Pope. I said, meet the Pope? I said, I'm a black Protestant. I said, what the hell am I going to do? Go see the Pope. He says, the Pope has heard that glider pilots flew great big glider, which I don't know anything about, and he says, flying that glider, he says, you got to come and tell me all about that, how you do it. And I said, yes, sir. So I go back there, and my outfit cuts orders for me to go see the Pope and explain everything to him and all that stuff. So in doing that, I got something for you to read.
Sir, could we look at that after? Would that be okay if I saw that after the interview?
Sure.
Okay.
Anything you want.
Okay.
But I've got it all in there
I'd love to see it.
in one piece for you to read.
Okay.
And I've even got what the Pope gave me and all that stuff.
Wow.
I take my orders, I go to the Vatican. So the Vatican has Swiss guards, you know, those fancy dress guys. And I'm down, there's only one door that goes in there where the Pope is. And so I get off, I have a Jeep, I get off the Jeep, one cardinal comes and I show him my orders and he said, yes sir. He said, I'll take you up to meet the Pope. So we go in the door and it's a stairway, and at practically every other step of the way is a locked door. So we're going up, and walk all the way up to the top of the Vatican, and some more popes are there, and they open the door, beautiful doors, and there's a Pope standing there, Pope Pius XII. Very, very good-looking guy. I walk in, I tell him who I am, I show him my orders, and he says, now, please, tell me how you fly combat glider and you don't have a motor. So for over 2 hours, I talked to the Pope Pius XII and explained how we are stuck behind the lines, like at that particular time into Yugoslavia, and we're rescuing French military personnel and getting them back, sneaking them back to Rome to a huge room that they were saving their lives and all that sort of thing.
Will you tell me about that, sir?
Huh?
The Yugoslavia? What happened there?
Yugoslavia, paratroopers had gone in first into some valley, and they had rescued a bunch of French military, which I got a medal for doing even. I think I got a copy of it. Yeah, I do. And so when we get back, let me get my bearings here. So the paratroopers would clear an area big enough so that a C-47 could fly in, and it had a hook on the tail, and it would snatch our gliders and go from 0 to 120 miles an hour like that, and take us out and cut through areas that didn't have many Germans around, and flew back to Rome, landed and unloaded the wounded that we had, which turned out was a big deal, which I got a medal for later. And so you really should read that,
Sir.
because it's, see, I can't remember every little thing anymore about it, but this will give you a real good idea.
Okay.
It's right there.
Okay.
So when I went in, and I shook hands with the Pope, and he was very courteous and nice to me, and he handed me a bunch of rosaries. They were sort of blue, and there was cardinals around and whatnot, and I said, I'm a Protestant. He says, you're bound to have good Catholic friends seeing you're from Boston. And I said, yes, sir. I sent every one of them to Boston, and they still think I'm a hero, the people that received me, because I've gotten letters later on that they sure appreciate something from the Pope. And so after I got through talking to him, I'm still way the hell up in the Vatican, and I have two cardinals, old cardinals, take me down the stairs, all the way down. And before I got into my Jeep, do you want to see the little thing they gave me?
The pin?
Yeah.
Can I see it after, sir?
Pardon?
Can I see it after the interview?
Sure.
Okay.
And so we get down there, and one of the cardinals says, you've been very good, and you've learned a lot from what you do and how you save people, and so they don't die. And he says, the Pope wishes that you have this little memento, which is 2,000 years old. It's just a little thing, but it's something that we treasure, and we'd like you to have it to take back with you as a memento of what you've done, because you're the only uniformed officer that has seen or will see the Pope during World War II, because we try to keep everything civilian, because we don't want the Germans involved or anybody. Just as though it was a civilian affair. And so I said, yes, sir, and I left. I went back down to the CO and had a good time in Rome.
Well, where'd you go after Rome?
Rome, in Rome, I went to Gela, G-E-L-A, Gela, Sicily, where I was the commanding officer of a unit.
Do you remember what unit you were with, sir?
I don't know what that outfit was, because it was a short affair.
What unit were you with the longest?
Well, it was just Army Air Corps.
Okay.
And it probably had something.
Do you remember the number? Like if it was like...
I don't remember any of the designations anymore, unless it's written down there or someplace. And
So, when you went on missions, what did you wear? Did you wear what normal pilots wear? Did you wear what the infantry wore?
I had a pilot's deal, kind of casual affair that pilots wore, you know, little affair. And for one thing, I carried a submachine gun with that had a drum. I had another machine gun with clips.
So you had the grease gun and the Thompson?
Yeah, Thompson. And I had a M1. They were just kept coming out with them at that time. And I had a 45 caliber.
And when you flew missions, did you wear a steel helmet or did you wear the pilot headgear?
I usually wore pilot's headgear.
Okay.
We had steel helmets, but we were too damn busy doing stuff so that we didn't crash.
No. Sir, you flew on D-Day, correct?
I flew on the D-Day of Southern Europe.
Will you tell me about that?
Well, that's how where it all messed up. So I'm back in Gila, Sicily, and they figured they didn't know what the hell to do with us. So we were down along the beach, and we had our munitions and stuff, and all of a sudden, this one time, from the Mediterranean Sea to this, it was quite armored affair along the beaches there and stuff. At Gaylor, all of a sudden, from the sea, we could hear planes, C-47s coming in. And we looked over there, and there's Navy ships just offshore, some smaller Navy ships. And I didn't know what the hell they were doing there too. So the closer the military craft came to the shore, people really got concerned, because all of a sudden the ships that were down below opened fire on all the gliders. They didn't know they were gliders. They thought they were Germans coming in to invade, and they killed practically every glider pilot that was on those planes. It was never even mentioned in orders that I know of that killed all those people.
And where was this?
In Gila, Sicily. Right on the Mediterranean. And the Germans were in Africa, right across the water. And so they killed a lot of men. And but once we get rid of that, we had a good time ourselves. And so we lived with the PT boat commanders, the group of PT boats, and we used to go out with them at night down into North Africa, so that the British that were along with us could go down there and exchange their type of money for other type money that they could cash in on. In other words, they went down just to get some money, and any money that they captured and all that stuff, they were having a hell of a good time. And gosh, that was a long time ago. And then they decided that, God damn it, they got to do something with these glider pilots. So they sent us back down there and told we were going to invade southern Europe, the soft underbelly of Europe. They'd already done Normandy and all that stuff.
Mhm.
That was a big deal. But they had to bring in from the bottom. And where we were, we were, there was a lot of Germans around and whatnot there. And so they assembled everybody, and I was CO of some of the outfits and stuff, and we decided this one night that we were going to take a little town of MUY. MUY was a little town in the middle of southern Italy, and it was all very, very mountainous, and we were supposed to, paratroopers had gone in the night before, but practically all of them were killed, and we didn't know it. So, traveling in a glider in a combat operation, you never go over 1,300 foot. I think it was 1,500 around that time. And came in from the Mediterranean.
Do you remember what airborne infantry unit was attached to you guys?
No, just paratroopers.
Do you remember what unit the paratroopers came from?
Just a group of paratroopers that were killing all the Germans so that we could land.
Oh, you didn't have paratroopers in the glider with you?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, they were already there the night before.
Okay.
And practically all of them got killed by the Germans that were in the mountains right around the town of MUY.
Sir.
And so there were places we could land because they managed to clear out some of the area. But there weren't many of those people left. So came in, I was in a CG-4A glider, and I had a Jeep right behind me. I was the pilot. The Jeep was right behind me. And had 4 GIs in the Jeep. I had some mortars, some other ammunition, and a few more troops behind me. And I was supposed to take and land them there so they could do whatever they were supposed to do. I don't know. They never told us what they were going to do because we didn't give a shit what they were going to do. We just wanted to get down safely. So we came in from the Mediterranean Sea across into a mountainous section of southern Italy. So I'm about 1,500 feet or thereabouts coming in with all these troops and stuff and whatnot, and coming in, sweeping in. So I look around, there ain't a goddamn place to land, as far as I could see. And
was this at night or during the day?
this was toward evening. Okay. And so we come in and we get all kinds of Germans in the mountains all around are shooting at us. And I get, and I saw a place I thought I could put the plane down, maybe, and live. So I had hit for it. I shot him a little bit, and the plane, I hit some trees.
You said you were shot, sir, or the plane was shot?
The plane was shot, and I was shot.
Where were you hit?
This arm was paralyzed from where I got hit.
Yes, sir.
All up through here. I got one good arm, one good leg, and my whole head was smashed, which they fixed 4 years later. And so I tear off the wing. The Jeep with the 4 GIs in it, I hit up and stopped just like that. The Jeep tears loose from behind me, goes forward, pushes me out the glass front of the glider, ran me over, tore me all to hell, and drove off and went and did whatever they were going to do. And I was knocked unconscious also at that time, and I was unconscious for about 7 or 8 days, laying there, just laying there, because I was unconscious. So time goes on, and they start, and they conquer all the area, and they're cleaning it all up, and they find me with some glider. The wings of the glider are just real fine plywood of some sort and stuff. So I'm in a bunch of plywood and stuff, and they find me, and they find me, and they see that I'm still alive, and they pick me up and they take me to the beachhead. And I go down to the beachhead. They take me to the beachhead. I'm still unconscious, and they managed to fly me. They flew something in, some sort of transport of some sort. They took me into Rome and put me in a hospital room with 100 other officers that had been wounded in this operation and all that stuff. And I'm still unconscious, and I'm laying there, and I'm still out. I guess toward the 7th or 8th day, and I gain little consciousness, and there's a captain walking down the aisle of this hospital, and he says, "You're alive, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm pretty beat up." He says, "We'll try and fix you up." And he's working on other people, and he says, "You know, the one big trouble is in this operation, we've used up practically all the morphine and all the stuff for using in operations and really taking care of you. But," he says, "we will do our best." And he worked on me for 5 hours that night, and I was still really in quite not good shape. And so the next couple of days, when I gained more, he came walking down the aisle again. I recognized him. I said, "Thank you for saving my life." He says, "Well," he says, "we've got you. It looked like a tube stuff because you have so many broken things and whatnot. But he says, you don't know it, but I'm your son of a bitch. I said, what? He says, I'm your son of a bitch. I said, what brought that on? He says, you were unconscious most of the time and just betwixt and between. And he says, as I worked for 5 hours on your body, he says, you kept looking up at me and saying, you red-headed son of a bitch, for the 5 hours I worked on you. And he didn't laugh. And he says, but I think you're gonna make it. He says, but I'll work on you some more if I get the opportunity. And he came 2 more days later, he came down and he tossed a Purple Heart on my bed. It was kind of beat up and had blood on it and everything else. And so I looked at it and I said, what am I supposed to do with that? And he says, stick it up your ass, it'll do you good. That's how I received my Purple Heart. And they finally flew me back to the States to Springfield, Missouri, at a military hospital. And for 4 years, they worked on me there. O'Reilly General Hospital, they finally, they took this partially away and rebuilt that. And the biggest trouble they had was this foot. See, in those days, if my foot was broken right off there, and they said that they would try to help it, because in those days they didn't have artificial limbs. So 4 years they finally got it so I could walk a little, and it's been that way ever since. And this arm is paralyzed and shakes a lot and stuff. But I got treated wonderfully at this hospital, and there was a lieutenant.
Were you in the same hospital for 4 years?
Yeah.
Like you didn't leave it?
Yep. O'Reilly General Hospital.
And was your wife with you during the time, or?
She came, yes. She came later, and they put her in a place to live. And we had a son at the time, and it worked out fine. I tried to help a lot of people that were mentally not quite with the programs. So I had been in the military service, and I knew how to treat people that were hurt, especially because my father was a first sergeant in World War I.
Wow.
And he joined when he was 16 years old in World War I, and he became a first sergeant, and he taught me an awful lot at a young age. In fact, I qualified on a Springfield rifle when I was 12 years old in one of his outfits. But what the heck more do you want?
That's incredible, sir. So were you only on 2 operations then? You did 2 operations?
I had 12 operations.
Can you tell me about some of the other ones as well?
Well, they just come along and say, we're gonna do this or we're gonna do that. And try to keep me so I could get out of bed almost sometimes.
I meant mission, sir, like with the gliders, the missions?
Yeah,
How many missions did you do?
one.
Okay.
One mission from the Mediterranean Sea into southern Italy.
And you did the Yugoslavia one as well, correct?
Pardon?
You said you did the Yugoslavia one as well?
Yeah, well, that was other stuff.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was saving people
Sure.
and all kinds of stuff like that. And you ever see the medal like that and all that?
No, I would love to though. Sir, will you say your name one more time and the rank?
Leonard J. Stevens. I started really when I got to be an NCO. I was a staff sergeant, and at that time it was just at the beginning of the war, and there was very few NCOs even in the Army at the time. So I got a lot of good information, and I knew how to work the system. Work the system was the secret of getting ahead in the military.
Sure. And you retired as a flight officer, correct?
I retired as an FO, flight officer.
And do you remember your serial number?
Yeah, T123455.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
And my serial number was 201-208-27. That's what's on. There's my
Oh wow.
my ID.
Wow. It was 100863490. It's amazing you remember that.